Good evening, class. It's me, Hank, of Hank and Spencer's Call of the Wild travesty. I'm talking to you today about three Call of the Wild films and their similarities and differences with Jack London's novel. Call of the Wild 1935 with Clark Gable, Call of the Wild 1972 with Charlton Heston, and Call of the Wild 2009 with Christopher Lloyd not as John Thornton, but as Christopher Lloyd phoning it in for a paycheck. First up is Call of the Wild 1935. Call of the Wild 1935 is, all things considered, a pretty great movie. Film in general did blow up during the 1930s, and this was due to the fact that people did need a distraction from the Great Depression. And this film is very appropriate as a 1935 feature. While in the novel the main character is Buck, in the film the main character is John Thornton, along with his buddy Shorty, character straight out of the Three Stooges, I swear to God, as they try to make it big by finding gold in the rivers of the Yukon. Now, I'm not inherently opposed to having John Thornton as the main character. By making Buck a main character in a feature film, you're either at risk of not translating the story properly or just coming off as goofy if you choose to do like a voiceover like Jason Lee in Underdog. So in that sense, the film works incredibly well. Buck is a horrible dog from the get-go, but winds up kind of warming your heart as the movie goes on. He's also a Saint Bernard mix, as he is in the book, and unlike any other film adaptation, the titular call also comes into play more than I saw in any other adaptation as well. Although the theme of this film is less instincts reign supreme and nature trumps nurture given the chance, but instead about how when you grow up, people will leave you, and you can only rely on yourself. John Thornton is what you might call a scumbag in this movie. He is a racist, he is a misogynist,
rough on women,
and he is in the book, but in this film, he's your cookie-cutter, rugged American hero. And having the spotlight and being painted to be this perfect individual, it doesn't sit well, and it sits less well watching it 75 years later. Here are two notable examples that really don't have anything to do with the presentation, but when I saw them, I flat out laughed. First up is when this woman, who he essentially kidnaps and then falls in love with him, realizes her husband, who she was looking for, is still alive, and then she says, I have to leave you now.
He wants to see you, Jack. What are you going to say to him?
I wanted you, and I took you with us. Well, I'm keeping you.
The second, and arguably more hilarious, was the way the film ends. This is how the movie ends. After she leaves him, after his friend Shorty leaves him, and after Buck leaves him, and he's alone in the cabin, and we're starting to feel bad for him again.
Shorty. It ain't gonna rain no more. Yeah! Shorty! Hello, boss!
You old son of a gun. You came just in time. You saved my life. Well, look at you. You're all dressed up.
Yeah, we're in the money. I filed a claim. We're rich. Richer than Astor's pup. No trouble at all. I went right in and signed the name. Told him the claim was up.
Shorty.
What?
What's that?
That's our new cook.
Where'd you get it?
I won it in the crap game.
I'm sorry, I just had to share that, and I think it's absolutely hilarious and tone-deaf and just bonkers that it even exists and is accessible to the public at this point in time. Some similarities here are obviously the focus on Buck as this dog who he's out of his element. He's not like the other dogs. He's this aggressive animal who takes to John Thornton when John Thornton starts to show him respect. Although, in this film, John Thornton does not show him nearly as much respect, and the adaptation to John Thornton feels kind of unearned here. Also, the Call of the Wild, it is referenced, but only in the last half an hour or so. And the theme, again, is less about instinct trumping nurture and more just about Buck leaving his bro to go get laid in the forest. I wish I was joking. The villains in the film are impeccable. They're just so cartoony and fun. And in that sense, the capitalist underlying of money can't buy you happiness, money will weigh you down, quite literally comes into play when the villains rob John Thornton and leave him for dead, and then crash their canoe immediately and are weighed down by the gold. It's actually pretty brutal for a 1930s film, and I was all about it. I was all over it. Biggest difference, again, obviously, is in having John Thornton as the main character, you're getting rid of all of these other stories that take place over the course of the novel. It's more of an isolated story, though the takeaway is essentially the same, and I think it's all around pretty effective, even if it does feel its age a little bit. In addition, the most integral part of the John Thornton-Buck relationship is the sled pulling scene, and anybody who's read the book knows about it. Buck he's proven himself countless times to John Thornton by saving his life and being an all-around good boy. So John Thornton gets drunk one night and bets everybody in the bar that Buck can pull a 1,000-pound sled that's been frozen to the ground. In the book, Buck is able to do it through John Thornton's coaxing and well wishes, while in the movie, John Thornton does not seem to think Buck is able to do it, and he kind of regrets it from the get-go. Buck is just this absolute powerhouse beast in the movie that has no motivation to pull the sled. He does not know what money is. John Thornton has really not shown him an overt amount of love. It just kind of feels off, so that's that. Call of the Wild 1935 is the best Call of the Wild film that I watched for this class, and it isn't really even close. It's a 7 out of 10. I would give it a 7 out of 10 movie. The largest earthquake in 2009 occurred in the Fiordland region of New Zealand in July. This was on the South Island, and it was caused by a reverse fault, which is when one tectonic plate is subducted by another. Scientists since then have hypothesized that this was due to Jack London spinning in his grave at such a high RPM that he was able to domino effect the tectonic plate upon which his grave was into the South Island of New Zealand. Now that's just a working hypothesis, but this film was so bad and such a spit in the face to his novel that it's not entirely out of the question. Call of the Wild 2009 is the loosest adaptation I've ever seen of a book. It doesn't follow Buck, or at least the Buck from the story. The Buck in this story is a wolf, which is interesting because the only real tie to the story is completely backwards. He begins as a wolf and he's injured by some hunters, who are the villains of the story, and winds up at Rye and her grandfather's house. Ryan is the central character of this film. She's a 10-year-old girl who doesn't like staying with her grandfather in the Yukon because she's 10 and the movie needs conflict. This town very much has the aesthetic of a fetishized Gold Rush town. It's got candy shops. It's got old-timey soda shops. They got dog sledding. That's like the big draw. That's the big sport in town. And she befriends this probably 18-year-old boy who wants to be a dog sledder. Her grandfather also starts reading her Call of the Wild, and it sort of parallels her own life, or at least the movie would like you to believe that. And she takes such a shine to it that she goes from hating the wilderness to loving the wilderness. And she names the dog Buck, as previously stated. This Call of the Wild film, even though you could make an argument, you could make an adaptation this loose, I guess is what I'm saying, if your themes were similar, if you had a reason, but this film is more aptly titled Call of Domesticity. It's basically Call of the Wild in reverse, and it is hilarious. In contrast to the novel, where Buck begins a pampered dog and becomes this rough and tough and fighting machine who triumphs even over humans, in this story is a wolf who is taken in by humans, falls in love with the humans, and then taken to live with this caricature of a Native American man. And that's the whole story. It's insulting on every level. The strong suit of the novel is its brilliant use of storytelling and language and dialogue. And this film has jack shit. It has zero of that. The story is predictable. It's cookie cutter. You've seen it 100 times. The themes are ass backwards. I don't know what it was going for. There was no care put into it. The dialogue is hilarious. There's really not much to say, other than it's Call of the Wild in reverse. Some similarities I wrote down, and there weren't many. The book's influence is felt in the setting and kind of in the characters. There are some, vile humans. There are some kind humans. Cruel humans are, once again, the villains. It kind of goes again with the last one. I'm reading straight from a paper right now. There is that mystical Native American character who's in the novel, but in the film, he's more just kind of forced, and it's almost could be seen as insulting. Not to mention, in the novel, he's a symbol of the wild that's inside all animals, whereas in this movie, it really just is about being loved by humans again. The wilderness is, once again, almost fetishized to the point of, I never get tired of looking at the snow. I could look at the snow for 3 months. The difference is, and I could go on, it's not violent. There's no violence. There's no triumph over humans. Even the book that the grandfather is reading his daughter is altered to the point that the entire theme, the entire takeaway has been bastardized and just crumpled up and thrown in the garbage disposal. It is shameless. Buck has no free will. He blindly trusts humans. He's dumb. The humans love him unconditionally except for the only bad 2 people in the movie. He's given the spot of lead sled dog almost immediately, and he does nothing to earn it. In fact, he fucks that all up pretty much from the word go. From the word whoa.
How do you say whoa?
Easy. Whoa.
In conclusion, it's terrible. It is terrible. And there's not much more I can say. And then finally, I sat down to watch the 1972 Call of the Wild film starring Charlton Heston of Planet of the Apes fame. And I was watching this one, and my initial thoughts were that it was actually going to be good. It was actually going into Buck's origin and showing John Thornton before he met up with Buck, and it was actually beginning to look like it was a decent Call of the Wild film. And I stopped watching that one immediately when Caleb was able to find an illegal stream of a Call of the Wild anime from 1981 that I'd been looking for. I was thrilled. Shout out Caleb. You were the real MVP that day, and I would really, really like to extend it. Can we give Caleb a round of applause, please? I'll pause. I'll wait. All right, that's enough. That's enough. We're good. So, Howl Buck from 1981 is a Japanese anime that's most famous copy is just one that has been translated into Spanish. So I was so thrilled to find it in English. This film is so faithful to the book, which I was very curious about. It's a cartoon, and I was thinking a cartoon is the ideal medium to be telling Call of the Wild, because it's from the point of view of a dog, and to do voiceover or to narrate it in live action, it's just going to come off as goofy. And this film, I'm so glad I saw it because it is so faithful to the original book. The changes are very surface level. They changed Sol Lex's name to Sorex. They changed Curly's name to Callie, and Dave's death is not in the film at all. But these changes really don't change a thing about the overall impact. What was most intriguing to me about this film, though, was that even though it was basically a beat-for-beat retelling of the book, it was still so unwatchably horrible. And I don't think this had anything to do with the swinging sax that permeated every scene inappropriately, or the anime when the dogs were fighting, or when Buck was having his flashbacks to his ancestral memories. It was just so jarring to see this story on screen. Now, I love movies. I love movies more than I would ever care to go into if you don't know me, like, super well. It's embarrassing how much I love movies. And this story was not meant to be a film. The 1935 version worked because it took its own liberties. It was telling its own story. It didn't hold a candle to the original book, but it stood on its own. This anime, it's just riding the coattails of Call of the Wild's legacy. And it's trying so hard, and it just can't stick the landing. So it's strange, and it took me 21 years, and to see this Call of the Wild anime that, for all, I don't even know how it exists, really. It's such a quintessentially American story. I don't even know. I'm getting off track. I get off track frequently. But now I know that some stories are unfilmable, and it's just so interesting to know that firsthand. When that clicked, it was like crazy. In conclusion, Professor Ripma, I know well that this is not the presentation you wanted, and I'm sorry it's the one you got. Class, I'm sorry for wasting your time. This was a total waste of time. Oh, Jack London, I see you. I understand you. And buddy, you can rest easy. At least for now. At least until 2020 when they reboot it again with Harrison Ford and Dan Stevens. But for now, here's puppies working overtime.
Oh man, the Northland, it's freezing and they're starving and the little dogs can just rest barely. Just rest barely. That bug, what the fuck? He was a timid little thing and now he's on the rampage carefully. Oh, so carefully.
And all because a man on earth, a yellow medal in the north. He's with Dave Solex, Pike, and more. Among these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 puppies working overtime, trying to get to Dawson. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 puppies working overtime, trying to get some nutrients from frozen horsehide. Pain, no pleasure, and the good ones just go blind. Oh dang, the club and Fang ruled the dogs, and when Spitz died they made Solex delete the audacity. Such audacity. Then so, in the cold, the dogs to awful hipsters who would overwork them all so terribly. Oh, so terribly. And all the dogs, they could not run. They worked them till the day was done. And when they collapsed, they were gunned to the ground. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 puppies working overtime, trying to get to Dawson. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 puppies working overtime. Good thing Thornton came and saw that it was a crime. Saved Buck from him and the light at the end of the tunnel shines.
And then they fell through the thin ice. And then Buck was one of the guys. Till Thornton and all of his men got ambushed at night. Ambushed at night.
And all because some man unearthed a yellow medal in the north. But now Buck charts another course as one of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wolves until the end of time. The wild cold he answered, they are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 brothers till the end of time, trying to get some nutrients from frozen horsehide. Now he's living high with his 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 brothers till the end of time. And they're never gonna make it to Dawson. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 alive! Life's a fucking uphill climb! For to be wild and he's living that life. Howling at the moon, never will he toe the line.